We're talking about the so-called parental rights movement that's sweeping across Canada, and let me tell you, it's not what it seems. To help us unpack this, we have Rachel Gilmore, an award-winning independent journalist who covers politics and the growing culture wars here in Canada and globally. Rachel, welcome back to the show, and let's get right into it because people need to know what's really going on here.
Yeah, it's pretty scary what we're seeing. We're kind of seeing this parental rights rhetoric that is the epitome of the culture wars in the education setting in the US come to Canada. It's very scary.
And it's a Trojan horse, really, right? They're targeting the most vulnerable of the vulnerable.
Yes.
And what does this mean?
So parental rights on their face don't sound like a bad thing. You know, parents
Right.
care about their kids. They want to know what's going on with them. And in most ways, that's not a terrible thing. But the problem is when you consider the fact that some parents are, parents are people. Some are homophobic, some are transphobic. And so when it comes to their kids and their kids' gender identity, their sexual orientation, not every home is a welcoming place for that. So what we're seeing is this growth in parental rights, so-called movements that are a direct response to the growing trans acceptance and students feeling comfortable coming out and exploring their identity and having these conversations. And maybe school is the only safe space where they can start to explore that because home is not. And so it's kind of this dark thing where these policies that require, and we can dig into those a bit more in a second, but these policies that we're seeing in New Brunswick and Saskatchewan that require parental consent for pronoun use in schools, those can take away the only safe space that some of these students have.
Yeah, and as a parent, I think about it. If your kids come to you with, their gender identity, that means they have a safe space at home. And if they don't come to you, probably means you're not a safe space. So maybe the questioning should be in your home and how you're parenting. But we've seen the Conservative Party really doubling down on culture wars provincially right now. I mean, even Stephen Lecce yesterday was alluding to this and will undoubtedly be a focus at the upcoming federal Conservative convention coming up. So what's the end game? What are they striving for here?
I honestly think that some parties believe they have a political winner here, because it's not an issue that I think a lot of parents are super well versed in. It's something that sounds scary. Schools are keeping something from you. They're talking to your kids and, they're keeping secrets. And it sounds bad when you put it like that. But what it is in reality is these are policies that actually take away these kids', as I mentioned, safe spaces. They are policies that, are directly harmful to kids that don't have safe homes. And I think that the end game potentially could be, as I mentioned, a political win. There was this study done in the US, and it was published in the New York Times, where these individuals were looking at, conservative groups were looking at trying to find a political winner of an issue. So they used to have gay marriage that they could use to rally their base and get donations. And they started polling on other issues once gay marriage was settled in the Supreme Court. And they found that trans rights issues, when it comes to youth, resonated with their audience. And so I think that a lot of conservative groups believe that the issue of trans rights in schools, trans rights with youth, it's a political winner. And so we're starting to see that leak into Canadian conservative circles. And it's scary because fundamentally it puts trans kids' lives at even greater risk.
And that's where I want to go with this next part, is because that is the real crux of this, is that this is going to cost lives. Do you have any statistics or anything you can share in terms of that when it comes to trans kids?
Yeah, so there's this group called the Trevor Project that does a lot of surveys into LGBTQ mental health and youth mental health. And they found that, I believe, I'm just pulling these figures off the top of my head, but I believe it's 45% of LGBTQ youth have considered suicide, seriously considered suicide. And that figure rises to more than half when it comes to transgender and non-binary youth. So these groups are even more at risk already. But the one thing that kind of mitigates and reduces that risk is when those kids have access to an LGBTQ affirming space. And what's scary about this is these policies take away what could potentially be the only affirming space that these kids have access to. And if that is what reduces suicide rates, taking that away, it increases them. Kids will die because of these policies. And I don't know why these politicians aren't listening to all of the people who are saying that, because they're being told again and again and again. If they just listen to the people who are studying these issues, they will know that they've got an incredibly dangerous policy on their hands here that will threaten kids' lives. And that scares me. It's very politically craven to push past these warnings.
And what's crazy about this to me is these are pronouns we're talking about.
Yes.
They're pronouns. We're not talking about surgery. We're not talking about anything bigger than that. These are pronouns that kids want to use in school, a space they consider safe. And we're denying them this. So let's talk about their rights, because they do have rights under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Yeah. I mean, kids are human beings. Human beings have rights. I'm not incredibly well versed in all of the individual aspects of the charter, but in the same vein, kids aren't property. So parents don't have a right to know every single thing that's going on in these kids' lives, to know every single little conversation that they have, to know, oh, did my son go on a date last week? Did my daughter, hold hands with a boy at school? We don't have a live feed going of schools for parents to check in at every second of the day. And it's healthy for kids to have their own lives, to have things going on that, isn't that their parents don't need to read their diaries, for example. That's another thing that people really oppose. And this is sort of the policy equivalent of forcing parents to read their kids' diaries. It's really a violation of these kids' autonomy and the fact that they are people. They're people with their own set of rights.
Do you think there's going to be an onslaught of lawsuits if they implement these policies? I mean, New Brunswick tried to do this and it failed. Saskatchewan's come out, now Ontario. Do you think they will fail in those provinces as well? And why are they doing it, knowing that New Brunswick just failed in this attempt?
Yeah. I think they're doing it because they feel they have a political winner on their hands. And even if it fails, they can blame that on the courts and say, well, we tried to do it. We tried to protect you. And, we're already seeing, to a certain extent, some of the politicization of the courts that is happening down south happen here. I mean, Jordan Peterson is politicizing the courts through his College of Psychologists decision. He's called them his courts, without saying who his is, but, he's probably alluding to Trudeau. So, we see this sort of politicization happening, and I wouldn't be surprised if we continue to see that as a trend where, these conservative politicians use the rhetoric that they believe will help them politically and don't let courts stop them from claiming ownership over that rhetoric.
Good grief, Rachel. I'm telling you, there is a name that I have avoided to mention on this show.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, it's a scary name.
So people are listening right now. I know my listeners are filled with empathy and compassion, and they want to do something. So what can people do to stay informed and take action against these really harmful policies?
I think first and foremost, you can write to your elected politicians. You can write to the provincial education ministers, the premiers, your local MPP, depending on which province you're in, and tell them that you're not okay with this and you don't want this. Another thing you can do is educate yourself on what is actually the issue at hand here, because I think a lot of people don't understand that the policies that we're seeing put in place, it's about pronouns, which are not something that, you can change your pronoun on any second. It's not an unchangeable permanent surgery or anything along those lines. It's a small thing that affirms these people's existence. And I think that the more people who understand that, and who understand that it's not about you as a parent, it's about the parents who aren't safe. Your kid, if you have a good relationship with them, they will tell you. You will already know it's not going to be an issue for you. It's just protecting other kids. So I think a lot of people really look at it from a personal perspective and don't realize that it's about a collective safety. So educate yourself so that you can have these conversations, so you can explain to your friends what's actually going on. And, you know, if we let facts win and let empathy win, I think that we can save kids' lives.
Yeah, and as a parent, I just want to add in here as a final thought, as kids are going back to school, talk to your kids about this. Talk to your kids about, making sure they are giving these kids safe spaces and protecting them as well, because they really do need allies right now more than ever, and particularly in the schools. So, Rachel, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope we'll have you back soon. But in the meantime, you are putting it out there every day. So where can people find you?
Yeah, so I'm on TikTok at Rachel_Gilmore. I am on Twitter, unfortunately, still at Rachel Gilmore. I have a link tree there where you can find all my other social medias, but the other big ones, Instagram, r.gilmore.
All right, incredible. Thank you, Rachel. We'll have you back soon.
Thanks for having me.